That was the International Morse Code Signal, SOS, Save Our Ship. And that sounds the beginning of my program, Gilbert Talks Taxes. And as it has turned out, taxation with representation has not been so good either. People have asked me why my opening theme is the Morse code, SOS. And I tell them it's because when Gilbert talks taxes, there's usually a call for help. Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to my program here on WCAB 590 AM. I also want to welcome Northland Cable subscribers on Northland Cable Channel 5. And you can also watch us here at CAB in the Blue Room live at www.cab59.com. We are live streaming. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gilbert Carmona. I am the owner of Gilbert Carmona's Tax and Accounting Service. I'm located at 113 Whitesides Road in Rutherfordton, right at the end of the street here, the same street that WCAB is on. I welcome you to call me live here at the studio. My number is 828-289-9300. You can call the station, 828-287-3356. You can also visit my website, GilbertTalksTaxes.com. Click the Contact Us page and send us a message. I have my laptop here, and I'm going to try to answer those questions also. We don't have the capability to get you live on the air here in the Blue Room, but Christy, my wife, will be answering the phone, and she'll bring the question to me. If I can't answer your question live here on the air, I will get back to you. I'll either email you or I'll call you back, and I will try to find the answer for you sometime during the week. If you've received letters from the IRS, if you've received letters from the state of North Carolina, if you've received letters from any taxing authority, any state, and you've got a question about that letter, go ahead and call. Now, if you have the letter with you, when you're talking to Christy, you can just give her a nutshell of what the letter says. But letters from the IRS and North Carolina Department of Revenue in the upper right-hand corner usually have some codes. They may call it a case code, or they'll call it a file code. With the IRS, they almost always begin with the letters CP. That's capital C, capital P, like CP 2000, CP 0054. Give Christy those codes. In my world, those numbers all mean something, and it'll help me understand what the letter's about. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I own Gilbert Carmona's Tax and Accounting Service. We are a full-service tax and accounting business. I am an enrolled agent. An enrolled agent is a tax professional recognized by the United States federal government to represent taxpayers in dealing with the Internal Revenue Service. The profession's been regulated by Congress since 1884, and we are the only profession that is regulated by Congress, the only profession of the three regulated by Congress, the other two being CPAs and attorneys. These are the only three groups of professionals that can represent a taxpayer in collections, appeals, and audits before the IRS. We follow guidelines of the Treasury Department Circular 230. It's a Treasury publication, and it mandates strict ethics and continuing education standards. It ensures a high level of professionalism and accuracy in everything I do. I shared with people last week, and I was very, very interested at the responses I got. Last year, it was estimated that there's only 43,000 enrolled agents in the whole country. That's 1 in 8,000 Americans. It's a very small population, but we're a very skilled population, and we take taxation seriously. Today, my engineer is Jay, and I welcome you, and I especially want to welcome Sheldon in Michigan, whose email assured me he was my biggest fan. Good morning. It's very cold and snowy up there. I'd also like to welcome Paul in San Miguel Allende, who will be live streaming me this morning on www.wcab59.com. And it is not very cold in San Miguel Allende this morning. And I don't want to forget to welcome Kenneth and Diane right here in Ralston. Thank you for listening. Before I tell you what this program is about and get into the questions that I've gotten and some of the comments I've heard this week, I want to tell you what this program is not about again. This program is not about ways to avoid paying taxes. As an enrolled agent and as an accountant and as a business consultant, my job is to help simplify your tax issues. At the same time, I want to help you comply with your tax liability. And to that end, that's why I'm having this program and why I'm here every Saturday morning from 9 to 9:30, because I want to teach you, I want to educate you, and I want to help you with problems that you may be having. This program is not about avoiding taxes. It's about how to deal with your taxes, how to plan for them. Now, in the process, if I can reduce your tax burden a little, with a little tax planning and a little foresight, well, that's just fine by me. Last week, I told you everything I knew about 1099s. And I got a lot of comments, a lot of feedback about it. The 1099 form, there's a lot to it. What's happened is the 1099 MIS form, the 1099 miscellaneous, has kind of become a catch-all. And it's got a lot of different things go into it that are seemingly unrelated. But the bottom line is it's a way to track money that's been paid from a business to not necessarily another business, but it could be an individual, it could be a contractor. I gave the story about Larry, who was he was a retired handyman kind of guy. He did a job for somebody. That person gave him a 1099, and it caused him to have a $1,200 tax liability. Actually, because he ignored the 1099, and that was the point that I wanted to get to, is don't avoid your tax problems. When you get a letter from the IRS, deal with it immediately, because that was really the root of the problem. But when he got his 1099, he ignored it, and he didn't declare that money because he legitimately thought he didn't have to. He was retired and he could earn so much money, and this 1099 was reported. Well, he was wrong. He had earned more money than he thought he had, and the 1099 proved it, and he did owe that money. Now, to that end, we were able to solve his problem once he finally came to me, but a $1,200 problem became a $6,000 problem that he had to pay money to get out of. One of the biggest questions that I got about the 1099 was from employers who want to know, as a business owner, when do I have to give a 1099? The guideline and everything I tell you, you can go to the IRS website. I really want to give them a plug. It's a very good website. There's a lot of information on there. But if you don't understand something, please see a professional. I can't drive that home enough in this little short time that I've got to talk to you. If you don't understand it, call a professional. I give free consultations, and any professional probably will. You can call me, you can make an appointment and come in and see me, and I can at least tell you, give you the nutshell of what the problem is, and going forward, what it's going to take. Is it going to cost you money to get out of it? Should you pay money to get out of it? Or is it something you can handle yourself? If I can empower you as a taxpayer to deal with the problem yourself, I will. Unfortunately, by the time most people are calling me, the problems are a little too complicated, and they really do need some professional intervention. But getting back to it, as a business owner, when do you give a 1099? I don't want to call it a rule of thumb, but as just a general guideline, if you're dealing with a brick and mortar business, let's say you go up to the local tire store. He's a brick and mortar business. He's been there for a while. We have many here in the county. They've been in business for a long time. I buy what I buy. Let's say I have 2 or 3 vehicles. I'm a contractor. I have 2 or 3 trucks. I buy tires. I spend $2,400. I got all brand new tires. He will give me a receipt. He'll give me either an invoice or a receipt or a purchase order, something like that. I'll write him a check. I do not have to give him a 1099. But now let's say I hire a carpenter to come and work for me on a job, and that is the only job I'm going to have him do. He does it himself. He brings his own tools. He is self-employed legitimately, and I'm going to pay him $4,000. I have to give him a 1099. The other rule of thumb that I tell all my businesses is, when in doubt, give one out. If you don't know, go ahead and give him a 1099. The IRS will never call you or send you a letter and say you should not have given somebody a 1099. It will be the other way around. You're going to get a letter or letters saying that you did not give, and they will list the people, because when we prepare the tax return and we do the expenses, we will list the business on the expense side. We'll itemize those businesses with the amount, and the IRS will turn around and try to match some of those businesses to their database. And if they don't get a match, they will actually send you back, and these are businesses that you paid more than $600 to, because that is the guideline, $600. If you gave somebody more than $600 that qualifies to receive a 1099 MIS, you're supposed to do it. And if you don't do it as a business, there are penalties, and there's civil liability penalties, and they can actually be pretty steep. But let's get back to this. When in doubt, give one out. The biggest trap I've seen over the last few years businesses get in is, let's use a lawn care service, because this summer was a very wet summer, and I don't think the grass ever stopped growing. It was growing while we were mowing it. So you hire a local fella who mows, a couple of dozen lawns every week, and you pay him $50 to come mow your lawn. Well, you don't think about it, because what's $50, and he mows your lawn 5, 6, 7 times during the summer, and that's it. You move on, you put them down as an expense on your Schedule C or your 1120 or your 1065, whatever form you as a business fill out. So in past years, especially a few years ago when we had a drought, and he maybe came around 4 or 5 times, it was not a big deal. But this last year, he might have been at your business every week. He might have been at your business every other week. So you pay him $50 every time he mows your lawn. He showed up 12 times that summer. There's your $600. And actually, I had situations where the landscape company charged this business about, let's just say, about $200. Normally he would have paid them $800, $900. Never thought to give them a 1099. Well, last summer he ended up paying that landscape company about $1,800. And he's trying to find them to give them a 1099, and now we can't get them on the phone. Because to give you a 1099, I need an EIN number or a Social Security number. An EIN number is an employer identification number that businesses can get from the IRS. Most businesses, if you tell them you need their EIN number, they don't have any problem giving it to you. But individuals, a lot of times, don't want to give you their Social Security number. There's a form that you, as a business, can require of a vendor. That form is a W-9. You can go to irs.gov and get your W-9, download it, give it to your contractor, and have him fill it out. The advice that I am giving my businesses this year, actually I started giving this advice last year, is get the W-9 before you pay them. I would let them know that to do business with me, to be a vendor for me, to be a contractor for me, you must fill out a W-9. If for whatever reason they don't want to, you really need to reconsider your relationship with that person, because any legitimate contractor, any legitimate vendor knows what that form is and will fill one out. Me as an accountant, I have filled out 7 or 8 this year for different businesses, because I am an independent contractor, I am self-employed, and I actually encourage them to get a W-9, and sure enough, they turned around and asked me to fill one out for them also. which I gladly did. So, when in doubt, give one out. The guideline is $600, but that does not mean that if you gave them less, you don't have to give them a 1099. You can give them a 1099 for any amount. And what that does is it reports it to the IRS. Now, as a business, the IRS can turn around and come back, and I've only had one case of this, and we were able to resolve it, so it never happened. But the IRS can come back and say, we are going to deny those expenses on your tax return because these are not legitimate expenses. Writing a check to that, going back to our landscape example, writing a check to Bob who mows your lawn is not proof enough for the IRS. I would encourage you to also get a receipt from the person, but the best thing you can do when you're dealing with these small contractors is get a 1099. When in doubt, give one out. You can get the form at www.irs.gov. It's becoming, let me say this and I'll finish with that, it's becoming so important that in recent years on the Schedule C or the Form 1120 or the Form 1065, you're even seeing a box that says, did you have any businesses that required you to give them a 1099, yes or no? And then the box below it is, if they required a 1099, did you give it to them, yes or no? And that's the IRS's way of telling you, of warning you, that this is going to get more and more serious, and we're going to have more and more of these. It's that time of the year. In 1 week, you are supposed to have gotten your 1099s and your W-2s out to all your employees and contractors. By Friday, you are supposed to receive your W-2 and your 1099 from everyone you worked for, any business you worked with. So this year, as with every year, I get a lot of phone calls. What do I do if I don't get my W-2? Even though the deadline date is the 31st of January, that doesn't mean that February 1st you can call the IRS or you can file a tax return without your W-2. The tax preparers that e-file cannot, and this is IRS guideline, IRS guidance and governance, EROs, which I am an electronic return originator. I am a person that can originate tax returns and file them electronically. Most tax preparing firms are. Some aren't. Some have other places do that function for them. But I electronically file them all directly to the IRS. We cannot file your tax return without a W-2. We cannot use your last pay stub. There's always, especially when the end of the year falls in the middle of the week, and there's issues there where it doesn't, the auditing is not correct and the numbers are never right. Sometimes they are, because if the last day of the year, the last day of the fiscal year is the last day you get a paycheck, and some businesses do it that way for their own internal accounting, but for the most part, there's always a plus or minus there. So we cannot file your tax return just using your pay stub, your check stub. You can come to my office with your check stub, and I can go ahead and give you an idea of if you're going to get a refund or if you're going to owe money or what your tax liability is. I can use it as a guide. We can do some tax planning with it. But when it comes time to actually file it, no, I cannot do it with your check stub. I need a W-2. Okay, the first day to e-file is January 31st. The last day to get your W-2 is January 31st. So, if you don't get a W-2, what do? I've actually, a couple of years ago, had a lady who came to me after the fact. She was not one of my clients. because I would not have let one of my clients do this. But we had a lady, let me call her Angie, that is not her real name. Angie came to me because she got a letter from the IRS. The letter said that she forgot to tell them, it was actually a CP 2000, which is a very serious letter from the IRS. It's a statutory notice of deficiency. We call it the 90-day letter because that gives you 90 days to respond. If you don't respond, you've lost all appeal rights. It's a very important letter. So she gets this CP 2000 that says she forgot to claim income of about $24,000. So I said, Angie, how did you forget to have income of $24,000? She said, well, I didn't get a W-2 from that business. She was actually, let me tell you, what she did is she was in the healthcare profession, and she had a lot of part-time jobs because the nature of what she did, no one healthcare provider hired her full-time. So she actually worked at 3 or 4 places. So in fairness to her, she had a lot going on. But this was actually her biggest one. It was her biggest employer that year, and it was her biggest source of income. So she said, well, I worked at 4 places, and I got my 3 W-2s, and I did not get one from this business. And I said, well, you're supposed to call them and ask them for it. That's what you do. If you don't get your W-2 by January 31st, the IRS says to pick up the phone and call the employer. Well, she said, I called the employer, but they were out of business. They actually closed their doors and filed bankruptcy. I said, okay, well, just because the employer went out of business and is filing for bankruptcy does not mean you didn't make that income. And she looked at me and said, oh, well, I didn't know that. I said, well, yes, you owe that money. So she actually got penalties, interest, and owed about $8,000 total because that was a big chunk of her income. And what made it worse was because her income was so low, she qualified for some tax credits, which she now had to pay back. And that's why these implications of you get a letter from the IRS, please don't ignore it. Deal with it right away, because this could really have turned into something huge. And I was able to help her. We were able to go back. But so what do you do in an Angie situation? You got an employer that went out of business. Now, this employer was actually in bankruptcy. So it was a simple matter to find out who the bankruptcy attorney was. Contacted the bankruptcy attorney. Oh, sure, we've got those W-2s right here. Let me get it to you. And it was that simple. I had another client, which was the opposite story. He came to me right away and said, I worked for this business for 6 months during the summer. It was a seasonal, temporary kind of a job. The owners have sold the business. They went into bankruptcy. The original owners sold the business, went into bankruptcy. The new owners don't have any records, and rightfully so. It was not their responsibility. What do we do? Well, I had plenty of time to work on the case. I was able to find the bankruptcy attorney, very nice people who were very helpful in Charlotte. They had actually, as part of the bankruptcy, they had actually seized and taken possession of the business's computers. So they had all the hard drives, they had everything. They were able to generate a W-2 for me and get it to me with plenty of time to file our tax return, and Jerry got his refund and everything was good. So there are ways around it. Now, the IRS guideline says if you do not get your W-2 from your employer by February 14th, Friday, February 14th, the first thing you're supposed to do is contact the employer and find out what happened. I would tell you by January 31st, I wouldn't wait till the 14th. I'd be on the phone to that employer finding out what happened. A lot of times it's just stuck in the mail. Some employers can email you a copy, can fax you a copy. It doesn't have to be any kind of an original copy. As long as it's what they've reported to the IRS, you're good. So by February 14th, you contact that employer and you ask them what happened to my W-2. Now, if you're in a situation like Angie and Jerry, where their employers went out of business, we try to find out what happened to the business. Is it bankruptcy? Is it receivership? Or did they just pack their bags and get out of town and nobody knows where to find them? If that's the case, the IRS has a form, and I drew a blank on the form. I believe it's Form 4852. Go to the IRS website, irs.gov, and look it up. I'm pretty sure it's Form 4852. You fill out that form. Now, in this case, you do use your check stub, and you try to estimate the best you can. If you don't have your check stub, you try to estimate the best you can. I have tables and things I can work out. Your tax preparer, whoever you go to, can work it out, and then you paper file that in. But if you worked somewhere, you know you worked there, you've got to report that income. Just because you didn't get a W-2 or a 1099 doesn't mean you didn't earn the money, and it doesn't mean you don't report it to the IRS. I've got a question. If a contractor is incorporated, and very good, I get this question a lot, do I need to give them a W-9? I would say yes. When in doubt, give one out. If you're dealing with a big contractor who's got a brick and mortar, getting back to that scenario, who's a brick and mortar builder, you're dealing with some of the bigger builders that are very, established and have a location, have crews. That's maybe a little gray area there, but when in doubt, give one out. You're supposed to. How often do we get the W-9 for the same contractor? The guideline has been every year. So what I do with my clients is, as a business practice, I have a list, and every year we just send it out. We either email it, whatever I have on the list. I either mail it, I fax it, or I email it to them and get it back. The point I want to drive home there is, get that W-9 before you pay them, because after you pay them, you're not going to find them. I have a stack on my desk right now of where the employers did not throughout the year, because they get busy, and it is a burden the IRS has put on us. I don't think it's a big burden, but it is a burden, and it is a responsibility, and people get busy, they forget. Well, here we are in December, first part of January, I'm going through their vendor list, and okay, let's get the W-9s, and I'm missing about 15 W-9s for another business. I was missing 13 for one, 15 for another, and 5 or 6 for another. And okay, well, we've got telephone numbers, and we start calling these people, and they're not calling us back. When we tell them that I'm the accountant for such and such a business, and I need your information so I can give you a 1099 so you can pay taxes, they aren't going to call me back. We're getting close to the end of the show here. A half hour is not enough to talk about taxes. I have a stack of things I wanted to talk about. You can call me during the week. Please come see me. I'm at 113 Whitesides Road. Consultations are free. My telephone number is 828-289-9300. You can call here the station, leave a question for me. Jim will be more than happy to get it to me. 287-3356. Northland Cable, Channel 5, thank you for listening. Subscribers, you can watch us on www.wcab59.com. My website, gilberttalkstaxes.com, because taxation with representation hasn't been such a good thing either. And if I didn't get to your questions, please call me. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much.